Paint the fucking world.
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 And paint the fucking world.
Paint the fucking world.
Paint the fucking world.
Paint the fucking world.
Welcome to Paint the Fucking World Minisode. I am here with Nolan, as always, and we are joined again with the Pound of Pock. Today, we have a question that they don't know about, but I am throwing this on them. Can you separate the artist from the art? Now, what I mean by this, if you know an artist is a complete asshole, or there's things about them that you don't necessarily like or agree with, are you able to separate the artist from the art?
So we're going there.
Marco and I have had this discussion before, and we differ in opinion. So I'm curious to know, Jeff, how do you feel about this? Like, let's take a band. You've liked a band for years, and all of a sudden they come out and the lead singer is not a very good person. Right. Do you still like that band?
That's a hard question.
That's why I chose this question.
I do have examples. I do have examples of bands that I have experienced that with. And I do know of artists that I've experienced this with as well. And I have a hard time because there's two levels to this, in my opinion. One level is you always have to admit talent.
Sure.
You cannot deny talent. There is never denying talent. Just because somebody's an asshole doesn't mean they're not talented.
Agreed.
So I will always admit when somebody's talented or somebody has the ability to do great work. Where I draw the line is if somebody's a straight asshole, I can't support that. And I can't support them. So yes, you're talented, but unfortunately, you're also an asshole. And I can't support that. I don't like bullies. I don't like people who are going to gatekeep and bully and judge and act as if, they're better than everybody. You know what I mean? And you start to get into crazy levels of argument with, is their work original? Is your work original? Who's, are you copying them? Are they copying you? Like, to me, that's just a pull at the ego, right?
Yeah.
And when you get into that situation where somebody's attacking someone else because they're, biting their style or something to that extent, I shy away from those people because my honest opinion is artists want to get their work out there, and a large number of artists want to sell their work. It's a way of living, right? Mm-hmm. It's a business, and when a business is putting something out that's better than what your business is putting out, it's threatening. And some people, rather than step up to the plate and elevate themselves and say, you know what? They're producing something better than what I'm producing at this moment. I need to bring my stuff to the next level. How can I do that? What can I do with my art to transform and transcend into another level that'll make me interesting to the general public? Mm-hmm. Instead of doing that, you find people who will just lash out and attack.
It's kind of like the
like a slander.
It's the de Kooning and what's the famous abstract painter? I can't remember his name off the top of my head for some fucking reason.
Jackson Pollock?
Pollock and de Kooning had this really famous feud for years and years and years. And it's very much that, like, to the point where de Kooning bought a house across the street from Pollock's grave.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, we're all creators. You know what I mean? And I have influences from other people. We've all been influenced in some way, shape, or form with our art and everything that we do. We are who we are because of things we've either grown up with, things that we've experienced, things that we've seen, techniques that we've latched onto and said, oh my God, that's amazing. I need to learn how to do that.
Sure.
And to me, when you're somebody who's just an absolute stick in the mud. inside joke, right?
Yeah.
When you're an absolute stick in the mud, I shy away from those people, because what that does is that, to me, that sucks the life and energy out of anybody who's involved in that situation. And it completely depletes creativity in my mind, honestly. We all create for our own reasons, whether it's just to push art out to sell, or if it's something emotional to put out on paper because that's the only way you know how to express your feelings. To attack somebody for their art and to be a complete asshole about it, to me, shows that you're one of the worst type of people out there. And what you're doing is you're impacting somebody's creative process, and potentially the way that they cope and the way that they handle themselves on a daily basis, the way that they escape whatever they're trying to escape. And to take that safe place away from somebody to be an asshole like that tells me you have total disregard for a human being, period.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be around somebody like that.
So one of the artists that I kind of go to is Picasso. Picasso was not a very good human being. An amazing pioneer in the art world, but not so good of a person. And for me, learning about him and the history of how he was really tainted my views of all Picasso, because now every time I see a Picasso, that's what I have in my head. So I don't appreciate it to the level that I may have beforehand. So it's hard for me to separate that art and the artists. And I just don't enjoy Picasso's because of who he was as a person. Kind of like there's a band, I can't remember the name of the band off the top of my head, but the lead singer was not a very good person and is actually in prison now. And I can't listen to that music because of what he is in prison for. Like, I will not support that band or listen to it, because it's all I'm going to listen to, or all I hear when I listen to that music. So it's hard for me to separate art and artist. Like, for me, it's one and the same. And I know Marco differs on this opinion, because I will say, like, I can't enjoy their artwork because of who they are as a person, whether it be music, writing, or visual arts. So I have a hard time making that, and that could be just me, but I know that is something that I've found within myself, that I can't make that separation.
Well, and that's why I was saying, like, there's levels to this question, in my opinion. You know what I mean? Because I mean, Picasso was a phenomenal artist, period. The techniques were, amazing. The compositions, there's a reason why he's revered the way that he is in history. However, there's also the level of support. You know what I mean? And that's why I said I can admit somebody's a phenomenal artist, but there will always be that connotation or that little hashtag in the corner that says asshole. And to me, somebody who's like that, I'm not going to support. I'm not going to buy your art.
Yeah.
I'm not going to support your shows. I'm not going to attend your lives, things like that, because you're genuinely a disgusting person in general. Yes, you're talented, but unfortunately, as a person, I can't get behind somebody who's like that, because as talented as you are, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of other people who are also talented at an equal level, who are also great people, who are supportive, who does everything they can to boost somebody up. You know what I mean? And help them, and help them excel and get to the next level. I think you and I, Tyler, we were talking about it just today or the other day. Not everybody's skill levels are the same. And with the collective that PTFW has started, there's all levels of artwork, and there are people who are just starting. There are people who've been drawing for a few years. There are people like some of us who have been drawing since they were freaking 5 years old, and have studied and learned technique and proportions and things like that. And to me, if somebody takes a piece of art that I created and is inspired by it and wants to replicate some of the technique or paint on something similar because they were inspired by it, I say by all means go for it, because if you produce something better than I did, you better believe if I ever have a chance to talk to you, I'm going to be like, dude, where did that come from? Or how did you do this? Or man, that looks really awesome. Great job. It's all about encouragement, and when somebody asks my opinion on this portrait that they drew, the proportions may not be there. One eye may be offset a little bit, or the spacing might not be quite right to the typical proportions that you draw a portrait for. And I'll give that critique, but I'll also make sure I point out where they're doing great, because they might have phenomenal shading in the portrait. It's just the proportions slightly off, so it distorts it a little bit. And that's where I feel we should be as artists in general. I understand some people end up feeling threatened because it is a business for some people, right? And sometimes slander campaigns are the easiest way to push your product. I don't agree with that as a business practice. I don't agree with that as a human, and I won't support their art. I will admit that they're a good artist, but I won't support their art in any way when they're like that.
I'm like, that's basically how I feel as well, Jeff. But so you guys will know like where I'm at and why I look at it that way is whether somebody is, I would look at the person when they're being assholes, and my thought isn't like, oh, why is that guy like, my thought is like, damn, what happened in this person's life, or what are they going through? What exactly is making this person be like that? So I try to do that as much as I can, just because when you take the time to try to understand people, I feel like it will help you understand yourself a little bit more. Like, oh man, okay, so I was kind of mean, or I was a little bit judgmental or egotistical, if you will, when I was doing this because I was feeling this way. Maybe that's why they're doing that. So hopefully they'll get over it. I shouldn't treat them bad, right? It's kind of like that. So when I look at somebody's art and I'm like, dude, that's awesome, that's amazing, and then it turns out, oh, they're an asshole. It's the same thing. I'm like, oh, well, it sucks now because I'm never gonna work with you unless you show me later that you've changed, or it's like, okay, I'm sorry, but I'm never gonna work with you. I'm gonna look at your art, and I'm probably gonna, deep down inside, I'm gonna be super sad because it's amazing, and I would love to help boost you up, or work in a collab, or just be in the same room with this like with these inspirational pieces. But because of your attitude, it's never going to happen. Is it going to change how I look at their pieces? No, because initially, if it inspired me, it's always going to inspire me. I'm always going to look at it. Is it going to remind me of that person and how I was treated, or how I saw them treat someone else? Probably. And that might have a hindrance. I'm not going to lie. That might have a little like, oh man, kind of like what you were talking about, Tyler, where you can't listen to the band because you understand that you're hearing this individual's voice and this person did like something heinous. I totally get that too. It's just I remind myself, people have bad days. People might just be bad people, period. Yeah. But I shouldn't judge what comes out from them, because it might actually be coming out from a emotional place, something that they can't talk about. And
now I feel like an asshole.
No. No.
Well, and you have to think about too is there's another side to that too, where in our opinions this is how we feel, but that person may not view their actions as being bad.
Exactly.
And the thing that we have to watch ourselves as well in is we also don't want to be the assholes, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I choose not to support you, but I'm not going to go and talk about you with other people as well, because that's just as bad. I'm basically putting myself at the same level and adding fuel to the fire, right? It's like I don't believe in turning a blind eye. Like, I believe in sticking up for people when the time is right, and doing the right thing. But past that point, there comes a point where you have to draw the line and say, okay, the situation's done, and I'm just going to ignore them from now on. You know what I mean? Like, if you have an opportunity to stick up for somebody, you do it. But in the long run, why continue to carry that? You know what I mean? Ignore them, block them on social media, do what you got to do so that you don't see this person on a normal basis, and move on with your life and continue supporting in the way that you feel is right, because in their mind, they're doing what they think is right as well. And who am I to say you're doing something wrong?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like I, for myself, feel that what you're doing is not right. Therefore, I choose not to support. But that doesn't mean I'm going to wage a war against you because you're a shitty person, in my opinion, because that makes me equally a shitty person.
So I gotta say, man, ethics is people find it very boring. I'm very into philosophy. I love philosophy, and one of my favorite parts or areas in philosophy is ethics. And the main reason is because, like I told you guys in the last little shorty about me being an elitist when I was in, or what I would consider an elitist when I was in high school, I was an asshole, man. And so I had to do some really deep meditation into myself. So, because I really wanted to change. I'm like, why am I like this? And doing that, along with some other stuff, kind of helped me understand, like, maybe that's why this person is acting the way they are. And essentially, I've met dozens of people that can't really, I myself, sometimes we can't really express ourselves, how we really feel, or people with trauma and stuff like that can't vocally express themselves. And sometimes they use art, whether it's written, whether it's a visual, or, any time of way to express themselves, that they use that to get that off. So like you said, Jeff, like, who am I to say, first of all, what they're doing is wrong? Because we all build our philosophy at one point. It could be from upbringing. It can be from parental conditioning. I love using that term all the time. Parental conditioning. It can come from that. But at one point we break off from it and we create our own. So the way I'm living my life, who is to say is correct and who is to say it's not? So I still do. I'm not going to lie. I still judge because it's like ingrained in us, but I try not to.
As an artist and an art lover, everything you do, you're judging. You can't get away from that. You judge artwork, whether it be a positive judgment or a negative judgment, you're going to be judging somebody's artwork. It's you learn to, it's a critique. There's aspects that you may or may not like. Is one of those aspects that you may or may not like the artist themselves? And for me, it's hard for me to separate that. Like, if there is an artist who I know is just not a good person in general, whether they be a criminal or a gatekeeper or anybody, it taints my view of their artwork to where when I look at it, like, I just don't see quality. I see negativity. And I try to bring a lot of positivity into whatever I do. And, there could be people that look at me and be like, that dude's an asshole, and I don't like his work because of who he is as a person. Yeah, Jeff. But, it's one of those things that, for me, it's hard for me to separate those two things because, artwork is a very personal thing. We put a lot of ourselves into what we're doing. So if I am looking at a piece that they've created, I know there's a piece of them into this artwork. And can I recognize they have talent? Yes. Can I recognize that it may be a good piece compositionally and all these things? Absolutely. I can certainly say that. But does that piece affect me like it would if I didn't know anything about the artist? You know, if tomorrow we found out that Van Gogh was a, you know, misogynistic fucking toxic masculine person, and all of a sudden all this shit's coming out that he was a horrible human being, would we look at Starry Night the same? Would it still have the same impact on us? For me, like, it would crush me because, you know, he's one of my favorite artists in history, and to know that, you know, and this is all hypothetical, to know that that may have been someone that he was in history would be very hard for me to get over.
But to me, that you run into the fact of now there's curiosity of what was going through his mind when he was painting that. Is there an internal struggle in his mind knowing that the way that he acts isn't the best way to do it, but it's natural and that's what he knows?
Sure.
You know, and is he trying to admit that he knows that there's an issue, but he doesn't know how to address it with his artwork? You know, there's a level, and that's why I said I can admit when somebody's a talented artist, absolutely. And there is a level of curiosity where I'm like, where are you coming from with this piece? You know, but it doesn't mean I'm going to support you to the extent that financially you're going to reap benefits from me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
well,
that's
why I brought up Picasso, because, you know, Picasso, I mean, he was famous, talented, pushed the envelope of what art was, and definitely is a pioneer in a lot of ways. But, you know, he was not a very good human being per se. I know, like, you know, there's just a lot of things that I don't personally agree with. Some people might not have a problem with it. But for me, I have those moral dilemmas within myself. I guess this would be a moral issue for me personally. And I can't look at his artwork without disassociating that from him.
Yeah.
And that's fine, man. That's totally fine. Like, it's definitely not wrong. It's just how you feel. And like, art itself is all about feeling. So if that's the way if that's the way you're going to take it, then cool. I'm not going to like look at you any different for it. You know what I mean? Like, and nobody really should. However, what I will say is I really like that twist right there. You started with Picasso. I'm not a really big fan of Picasso already. Like, I recognize the individual, and I know his influence in art history, but I look at most of his stuff. I'm like, all right, cool. But you know how I feel about Van Gogh. I love Van Gogh pieces. So when you talk about it like that, to answer your question just bluntly, I feel like I can separate the artist from the art, because if for any reason anything like that were to come out and that were to be true, I feel exactly how you would feel, Tyler. I would be devastated and broken because I looked up to this person. But now every time I look at these pieces, I'm more than likely going to be like, that is a Starry Night. That is not a Van Gogh piece. That is a Starry Night. Because I'm still going to look at it. It's still going to inspire me. I'm still going to love the technique behind it, the colors, just everything that has to do with that piece, except for Van Gogh.
Yeah.
I mean, there could always be the argument that the person put themselves off as a shitty person because they knew it inspired certain feelings in people.
That is true, man. That is,
I
like,
mean,
okay, if you want to talk about that, look at like wrestling. There's always a baby face and there's always a heel, right?
Always a heel.
People hate the heel. Some heels love to be hated, and that's what they like doing. But it's essential, right? So maybe to promote their stuff, they want to be seen as this glorified capitalistic looking individual, or maybe because it's a dog eat dog world, man, they have to be very assertive and aggressive in their way. Now, are we gonna do that? I know I'm not gonna be aggressive with my art.
I mean, you can go to the music, Marilyn Manson, Kiss.
They definitely don't look like what they are
in a certain persona, and and it raises feelings to their benefit in certain ways. And there are people who are turned off by it, who won't go to it because they think that they're shitty people and they don't want to support and they just can't hear it. But there are a lot of people who have successfully separated. And do I agree with everything that, Marilyn Manson's put out there? Not necessarily, you know what I mean? But do I like his music? Do I like the band's music? Do I like the talent? Absolutely. I think they're a great band. I think they've got a lot of talent. I think they've got a lot, that they've proven over the years. And what's funny is I'm looking at the screen right now and I feel like Tyler has something that he really wants to say.
It's one of those things where you have a stance and then somebody throws a rock into your glass ceiling. And because I've always been a big Manson fan, and I realized that what he is essentially an actor when he's on stage. Now it has come out in the recent couple of years that he's not the greatest human being, but and that has tainted me on his music for the most part. Like I've been like, okay, I'm just not as into it because of who he has been and things that have been publicized in the media with the cancel culture that we're going through. Things that are coming to light that may not have been talked about. So it is something that I have had a little bit of dilemma with. But I guess in the way like presenting a persona, like a stage persona, that's an interesting concept that I hadn't even thought about in relation to this. That you could be the nicest person, but who you portray in the face of the public is not who you really are as a person, which is interesting. I never have thought about that in relation to the art world, like and visual art world, as portraying yourself as somebody else to become more noticed.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe playing that villain to be more noticed. That's an interesting concept.
I mean, controversy brings curiosity. You know what I mean? And
everybody loves drama.
And if you can create controversy in certain ways, there's opportunity there. Do I agree with the concept? No. But can it work? Yes, we've seen it happen in history time over time. But you take a gamble because you either become successful with it and you do find a following because people like that you're they don't consider you a bully, but they consider you real, quote unquote. That's the most common term I hear. I'm just real. I put it out there like it is. And it's like, I don't have filter. That's fine. I get it. If that's who you are or that's what you want to do, that's fine. I don't believe in that because honestly, I'm not going to sugarcoat things, but I'm also not going to be an asshole about how I deliver a message to somebody if I need to.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely a possibility. And then you take a gamble. Either A, you get a following, or B, you got to start from fucking ground up because you lose so many people out from under you that you realize this persona is not what's going to help you move your art or move your music or whatever you're pushing, whatever product you have to offer to the general public, to everyday Joe. It's not going to sell. It's not going to move the way you want it to with that persona. And that's the gamble you take. And rebranding is one of the hardest things you can do. So you have to either, it's one of those, you go all out for it and you stick with it, or you try to rebrand and know that there's going to be a large percentage of people that know who you are and they're going to call you out on that. And it's going to take a long time to put that in the past, but it's an absolute possibility.
Yeah. No, I love the fact that you brought that up because it does bring up a lot more questions in my moral questions for myself. I mean, like I said, I've always loved Marilyn Manson. I mean, I got a guitar hanging in my studio that's signed by everybody from the original Marilyn Manson group. Twiggy and John Five and Gacy. It's one of my prized possessions. well, up until the last couple of years, when these, like I said, these things have kind of come to light that he's not actually like a good person. The Brian Warner aspect of it versus the Marilyn Manson, there's kind of that crossing there. But yeah, as far like, yeah, you've definitely put some thought-provoking stuff out there that I'm going to have to think on this a little bit more, because I've always had a hard time morally, separating myself from that. Like, it's been something that I'm like, I just can't enjoy what they're doing because of who they are as a person.
Well, and again, I mean, it's all branding, right? Like, your brand is positivity. It's inclusion. It's making sure everybody feels welcome as much as possible. Whereas somebody else's brand, they may have a target audience. They don't want everybody. They want specific people, and that's who they're catering to. And that's the people who are going to follow them. And they're okay with that. It's all about what brand you want to build, who you want to be, and who you want to be perceived as. And even if you have this persona, Marilyn Manson per se, who's to say some of the things that he's done under his real name that has come to light isn't just part of the act in certain ways to keep him relevant? Because the shock factor he had in the 90s isn't the same as the shock factor he has to have now.
Yeah.
Times change, people become desensitized.
Yeah,
so
very much so.
When you ask if you can separate the art from the artist, you have to look at whether or not that artist is really that person, or if that's the brand they're trying to build.
Yeah, or if the artist is part of the art itself. Because I don't feel like I am, as the artist, I don't feel like I am part of the art. It is I guess it's an extension of me in a way, but the what I produce is the art, not who I am. But I very much see where you're coming from, as the artist being part of like a whole installation per se. As a whole, the artist, the art, everything that has to do with them as a brand is the art itself. That's super fascinating.
And I was actually going to say that, like, it makes sense that artists would actually do that. Like, it's something that I feel an artist would actually get into, because then now it becomes a external piece of art versus here's my stuff, look at my stuff. But now I can become part of that. I know it's a thespian thing to say. It's a very actor-esque thing to say, but I feel like an artist that is really emotionally attached to their things, that has a chance to become something that's not that who they're not, like play a role, so to speak. They would have a lot of fun doing that. And then you always have that term, where it's like fake it till you make it. I watched a TED Talk where this individual was talking about stuff, but they changed it, and I actually fully love the way they changed it. Instead of fake it till you make it, it's fake it till you become it, right? So you start off one way, and you're just faking becoming an artist or becoming an entrepreneur or something. But at one point, you actually become that, because now you're not just you have the experience, you know what you're doing, you sound like you know what you're doing. And so these artists start off as the asshole just to get that persona going, that gimmick. But then they unfortunately slowly become the asshole. There's that. Or outside, they're like, no, fuck off, or if you don't have any money, I don't want to talk to you type of mentality. And then when they get home, they're taking off their jacket, and they put down their bag, and then they take off their mask, and they're kind of weepy and sit on the couch with a glass of wine going like, God damn, when am I going to be able to stop this? When can I not be this thing anymore? It's like, oh yeah, when I have money, or when I can support myself. So, and I've seen that, to be completely honest. I've actually seen that. But yeah, no, it definitely is an interesting way of seeing that, Jeff. But I do agree, dude.
There's so many layers that you can peel back in this conversation, because you don't know what somebody's going through personally either.
Mhm.
And that's the other part. You made a great point, Marco. You don't know what their home life is, right?
Yeah.
You may see all these photos of their great art. You may see all these photos of them going to shows and selling their art and things like that. But what you don't realize is they may only have $10 in their bank account. And they got to figure out how to keep the electricity on in their house.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
that stress alone can cause and push somebody to lash out in ways that they may not be proud of, but that's how they cope. And that's how
Right.
they're doing it. And that's why I said, earlier as we started talking about this, when somebody's a shitty person in my eyes, that's my opinion. We all have
Right.
opinions.
Oh,
Right?
absolutely.
Opinions are like assholes. We all have them. But at the same time, I'm not going to egg it on and start a battle and continue to criticize this person who I don't like. I'm just going to ignore and move away and avoid, because I don't know what the full story is. Everybody has a full story.
Don't feed the ego, man.
And you don't know what they're going through and why they're reacting the way they are. They could be conditioned to react that way from a young age. That's all they know. And because of their situation at the moment, that's all they know to do. And you know what? I hope, if that's the case, that things lighten up for them and that things start to roll for them and that they can break away from that, because I don't think anybody deserves to live like that, period.
Agreed.
But it doesn't mean I'm going to be there supporting them in every single way that I possibly can as well, because in my opinion, I don't agree with who they are as a person.
Yeah.
I'll still admit their talent. I just won't support them.
What's funny is I was worried that this episode was going to be short because people would have a quick opinion on this and we'd just be like, okay, we're 10 minutes in and we're done. Now we're 40 minutes in and we've went to this really deep place on this topic, and it's so much better than I could have ever expected, because it really opened a whole new aspect of this up to myself, and I am so grateful for that, because it really just it brought a level of excitement that I hadn't even thought about. So wow, that was fantastic, you two. I love how deep we got, but we are at 40 minutes, so we should probably let these listeners go. But yes, absolutely. Thank you, Jeff, for hanging out again. I can't wait to have you on more. And from Nolan and myself, thank you for listening. And I'm going to leave you with a paint the fucking world.
And stay rebellious, y'all.